Welcome to the Pat White Show. Let's get into it.
This is Sparta!
Well, allow me to take you back to the year 2010. Now, that was some 14 years ago. And, well, all I can say is I'd been on WOWO radio since 1997. But one day things happened. And frankly, I was no longer on WOWO radio. But you know what? That happens to everybody in radio. And one time or another, you're probably going to get fired in radio. Well, it turns out other media places thought it was something they wanted to cover. And here's how Channel 15 aired that particular story on that night, the day I got fired.
After 14 years as News Talk 1190 WOWO's afternoon voice, Pat White was let go today.
He will be replaced by the station's Saturday morning host, Pat Miller. News Channel 15's Aisha Husney has been digging into this abrupt change, and she is here with tonight's top story. Aisha, you actually spoke with Pat White today.
I did. In fact, when I talked to him on the phone, he said that he was shocked over the decision and that he's now just trying to focus on what he's going to be doing next. As many of you know, Pat White's name has been synonymous with WOWO for the past 14 years. He hosted a live call-in show every weekday afternoon. It covered a wide variety of topics. White tells me he found out this afternoon WOWO is canceling his show and letting him go. WOWO's operations manager says it was the right time for the station to change direction and create a more politically charged show that included relevant news, national and local politics, and more social commentary. He says White's replacement, Pat Miller, was an easy choice to deliver that.
Pat has been a constant on the radio station and the community for many, many years. He's been on WOWO for 11 years. And it's just time that he gets a shot at full-time. He's done an incredible job for us. Part-time, special assignments, the coverage after 9/11, political coverage, you name it, he's done it. And he's getting his shot at full-time.
Miller will take over starting Monday. As for White, he's not sure what the future holds for him yet. He says he did receive a severance package, but wouldn't go into detail about it. He said he'd like to find another job in radio soon.
Okay. Thank you, Aisha.
All right. So there's the story. I was let go on that Friday afternoon. But you have to understand something. Previously, the station people had come to me and said, look, we want you to talk more about politics. We want you to be Rush Limbaugh version 2. And because I followed Rush and everything he did pretty much was political. And I said, no, I ain't going to do it. I'm going to talk about things that interest me, things I think will interest the people in Fort Wayne. Doesn't have to be politics because I'm not into that. Yes, I touch on politics occasionally, but I talk about dumb stuff, weird things that are happening. People can do stupid things. And that young lady you saw in that report, Aisha Husney. Aisha, before she went to Wayne TV, she was my newswoman. That's right. She sat across from me in the glass. She was in the newsroom, the other side of the glass. And more often than not, I'd prank her. Oh, man. She was fresh out of IU. She was learning the ropes, but she didn't understand some of the humor that I had, and I used it. But I can tell you this. One day, Aisha walked into the studio, and she said to me, she said, hey, I've been offered a job at Wayne TV. Do you think I can make it in TV? Yeah, she asked me that question. Do you think I can make it in TV? To which I said, yes, you can. Take the job, go into TV. And, well, ultimately she did. And about 3 months later, and when things started to change in my life, here's the next story that Wayne TV ran.
It took me a while to get unstunned. But when I got home, the phone started to ring.
He was fired 2 months ago. Now Pat White is making a comeback. Next week, you will hear his familiar voice at a different time and on a different station. But before he does that, he sat down exclusively with News Channel 15's Aisha Husney.
Pat White calls the past 2 months a hiccup in his radio career. After WOWO Radio abruptly fired him, he's signed on now for a new talk show at WGL. During our conversation, White takes me through his wild radio journey, his exit from WOWO, and how he wound up back where it all started.
One door closes, another door opens.
Pat White is a living example of that saying. For the past 14 years, he's been the voice of afternoons at News Talk 1190 WOWO. White's opinionated show was notorious for pushing people's buttons, but he says it worked.
There's going to be people who love you and hate you. And even if they hate you, if you listen, I don't care. You're listening. You may hate my guts, but you're listening.
In April, WOWO's management decided they wanted to go a different direction and let him go.
I was stunned. Anybody who gets this is going to be stunned. But you know what? In this business, if you haven't been fired, you will be. And it happened to me, and I hold no animus whatsoever.
While he may have been shocked, it didn't take long before he was ready to get back in that saddle.
It took me a while to get unstunned. But when I got home, the phone started to ring.
One of those calls came from WGL 1250 AM, the station where he kicked off his talk show career more than 20 years ago. White said he connected with the station's vision and signed a deal for a weekday morning call-in show. That means he'll directly compete with former WOWO co-worker Charlie Butcher.
He's going to do his job exactly as he feels it's necessary to do, just like I'm going to do my job as necessary as I feel.
So what can you expect from White's return to radio?
If you've listened before, it's going to be the same thing you've had. I want to concentrate on both local and national and regional and stupid stuff and not make it all political.
So in your place in your life now, would you say you're happy and content?
I've been married for 30 years. I have a wonderful wife. I have 2 daughters. And now, going back into radio, yeah, sure, I'm happy.
White's new show kicks off Monday, and it will air weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m.
All right. Thank you very much, Aisha.
Now, obviously, there you saw Aisha. Other people wanted to interview me, and I would not do it with anybody but her because she was a person I trusted, and she knew it. Now, she's gone a long way. She's now national. She's big time. That other lady you see right there talking to Aisha, Heather Heron. Heather's back on the air. She's working with Linda, and they're doing a great job together over at Channel 21. It gives you a little idea what happened back in 2010 and where I went to and what I turned to. So, yes, I worked in radio, and I was proud of it, and I look back and say, you know what? I may have stepped on some toes, but I had a good time doing it. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. See ya. Coming up next. All right, let me ask you a question. Do you know what DORA is? DORA? Designated Outdoor Refreshment Area. Now, we have that now in Fort Wayne because, well, the state has approved people outside downtown Fort Wayne carrying around liquor, open liquor, beer, you know. Well, it turns out that they've also approved the electric works to be an area where you can be wandering around with your cup of beer and not being inside a bar or a restaurant or whatever place sells these things. And it's okay for you to be walking around. Now, here's the problem. There's people downtown that are saying, well, wait a minute, we want people drunk walking around. We remember, what happened at Three Rivers Festival back years ago, and it used to be down there off the landing. And there were places, the restaurants or bars set up business on the landing, and everybody was getting drunk. Well, now it's coming, and it's been approved by the state. Now, here's the deal. You can be out there standing around holding your beer cup, provided it says DORA on the beer cup, so you can't be walking around with your Budweiser can going, yeah, it's okay, I can drink. No. Must have the DORA cup. They got these special cups. Got to have those. And places you can do that is, say, the Landing, the Botanical Conservatory, PNC Plaza, J.K. O'Donnell's, Copper Spoon, the Sidecar, Mercado, Papa's Pizza, Nawa, Night Train, Dana's, Bistro Norda, the Porch off of Calhoun and Marquee, and the Electric Works. And the whole thing area around Parkview Field. You can walk around there with your cup of beer and not be arrested. That's been approved. Now, there's some rules. You can't take your cup into another bar that's a DORA bar and say, hey, fill it up. No, don't work that way. So your one beer you're walking around, you might have to dispose of that cup. You want to go to another restaurant or bar, It's a DORA bar or a DORA restaurant, or call it what you will. Got to get their beer, take it out, walk around. Will this be a success in Fort Wayne? To tell you the truth, I don't know. I don't plan to participate in this because, well, I don't drink beer, okay? And so are people going to be around there walking around the summer, walking around with their beers? They might. Festival time, Three Rivers, they might. You know, as long as people are cool, as long as people are nice about it, and as long as we don't have drunks walking around with their beers sloshing on somebody else, it may work. And it may be more people downtown in Fort Wayne to say, hey, let's go downtown because we can walk around with our beer. Well, all right. If it works, it works. But at least now you know what a DORA is. Designated Outdoor Refreshment Area. And downtown Fort Wayne, and now the Electric Works, are turning into a open beer, drink me zone. That's what it is. Now you know, folks. Now you know. See ya.
Coming up next.
Well, you may not know this, but this past weekend we celebrated Cinco de Mayo for the 162nd anniversary of this so-called Mexican holiday. Well, guess what, America? It ain't a Mexican holiday. You're saying, wait a minute, isn't that independence for Mexico? No, it's not. Not anything close to it. Matter of fact, Cinco de Mayo was created by a beer company to sell more beer. And if you're one of those stupid people that goes out to drink beer, margaritas, or whatever the heck else you do on Cinco de Mayo, you've been sucked in, dude. That's right, because Cinco de Mayo really means nothing to the people in Mexico. Yes, there are holidays they celebrate. They have their own independence days, but those things are totally different in Mexico. Cinco de Mayo only exists in the United States, and the Mexican people sit there and go, them stupid gringos, they're just going out to buy beer because they're idiots. Well, turns out that maybe not. See, believe it or not, you know what the number one beer in the United States?
Modelo.
That's right. Beer made in Mexico. And you guys are suckers for it. What's number two? Is it Bud Light? Is it Budweiser? No, it's not. Corona Extra. There you go. Another Mexican beer. You guys are falling for it. And number three, Pacifico. Really? Where's American beers in there? Or maybe number four. No. Dos Equis. Dos Equis Lager. Now, when I was down in El Paso, which is where I'm from, in case you don't know, that's one of the beers we used to drink down there. Dos Equis. It's a popular beer. There's another beer down there you also get called Tres Equis. Means three X's. So those are the popular beers in the United States. The American breweries have lost significance, and they've lost first place. Mexican beers are number one. Oh, and also number five is Corona Familial. So I'm just telling you what's going on, just so you understand. Cinco de Mayo is a joke. It's staged by beer companies to get you to be stupid and buy more beer, and apparently it works. And the number one beer that you happen to like, Modelo. Gee whiz, bite on that one or chew your taco on that one. Now you know what's going on in America. Now you know you've been had. That's all I got for you. See ya.
Coming up next.
All right, today is Wednesday, April 17th, I believe it is. And this morning I was listening to WOWO radio. I still listen to the radio, regardless of what anybody thinks. Happened to be listening to Ms. Caleb Blakely and her morning show. She does a wonderful job, but she was interviewing someone I didn't know about. And it's a gentleman who's got a new website I didn't know about, but I'm going to tell you about that website because I think it's something you might want to look at if you're interested in what's going on politically in this town. The website is called FortWaynePolitics.com. That's FortWaynePolitics.com. The gentleman who was being interviewed on our show was Nathan Gotch. I may be misspelling Mr. Gotch's last, maybe pronouncing it incorrectly, but I think that's what it is. Turns out he was a one-time independent candidate for Congress, and he spent a number of years building relationships, both local and statewide, in political areas. He studies this stuff. He's a political nerd, okay, for lack of what it is. Very nice man. I have conversed with him and had words with him back and forth. We discussed things. And I said, hey, I'd like to talk about your website and what you're doing. And he said, fine. So that's what I'm doing. It's FortWaynePolitics.com, Nathan Grotch. And back in 2023, now I didn't know about this, he produced an independent production called Marion, or The True Tale of Robin Hood, which apparently was going to be held by Carroll High School, but was canceled. I don't know the story. Don't ask me. He also was the Indiana director or the Indiana State director of the Business for America. He headed up the creation of the Indiana Business Alliance for Civics. What he's doing is he's talking about politics. He's interested in that. Well, he lists all the stuff you don't want to know about politics in this town. And he does a wonderful job of writing. He knows what he's talking about. He studies this stuff. Here's some of the stories he's working on. Precinct chairs, what they each think about the mayor, because the precincts are the ones voting for the next mayor of Allen County and Fort Wayne. And complete list of the chairs. So you wonder who your precinct chair is? He's got the complete list. How to look up your precinct. How Phil Giaquina. Phil Giaquina is one of the folks running for mayor. And in my estimation, he wants that job in the worst way. And he comes from a very powerful political family. And if you want to roll the dice, I think his dice look pretty darn good. But the fact the Democrat Party's had to move to a larger venue. Now, over at the ballroom at Purdue Fort Wayne, they had their meeting. People were interviewed. It's on TV. You'll be able to watch the questions that were asked. All the candidates were there. And that was for the Republican Party. But the Democrats are doing the same thing. They're going to be at Purdue Ballroom themselves to have the meeting, talk about this. So if you want to learn more about what's going on with the politics, left or right, frankly, check it out. And he has a great story that I like. Last Supper, he calls it. Tom Henry's final meal and the race to replace him. I didn't know this. I don't know how he got it, but it's some good stuff. So if you want to know what's going on, well, check it out. It's called FortWaynePolitics.com. Mr. Grotch, you're doing a good job, and it'll be an honor to be talking about you. That's what I know. Hope you'll check it out. You might learn something you didn't know about. Enjoy it. See ya.
Coming up next.
You know, one of the most unfortunate things that happens in our government is when we elect someone to high office, be it the Senate or the House, there's a potential they could be bribed. And I hate to use that word, but that's exactly what's happened in America. Overall, just in the United States, we've had 13 members of Congress have been indicted for crimes. 13. Now we just had the number 13th one that was done, Representative Henry Cueller. He's in the House of Representatives out of Texas. He and his wife have been indicted for taking $600,000 in bribes. He's not the only one that's now in trouble. Senator Menendez up in New Jersey, this is his second time around being charged. This time he may not get off. But here's what happens. Countries, they come to senators and congressmen who are very powerful, sitting on these various committees and say, hey, I need your help with this. I need this done. And a lot of times it's foreign countries coming in and are offering to pay these congressmen and senators big money. And they kind of hide it. Sometimes they'll put it in the congressman or senator's wife's name. It's a way of hiding it. Well, it gets found out. And eventually those people are charged. Now, Menendez is due to go on trial in New Jersey. But who's to say a jury is going to let him off again? Because juries, well, can be Persuaded? Yeah. Henry Cuellar down in Texas, he's got another problem because down in Texas, people are not quite so kind. He could find himself in the Gray Bar Hotel, but you never know. Can't predict anything because here in America, you are presumed innocent until you are proven guilty in a court of law. That's the way it works. So now you realize when you elect somebody to Congress, be it the House or be it the Senate, they can be bought and are bought. Thus far, number 13 is now on the books. That's how it works, America. You get high, you get in a big committee, and man, you will take money because money, that's what they want. It's a shame, but welcome to America. That's all I got for you. See ya.
Coming up next.
You may not have heard about this case that is now at the Supreme Court, but it's actually kind of a big case, and let me explain to you what it is. It involves the homeless. Yes, the homeless are in Supreme Court, and today the case was brought before the justices, and here's the situation. This took place in Grants Pass, Oregon. Now, you got to understand, about a third, almost a half of all the homeless people live on the West Coast. They camp on the streets or on the sidewalks, in parks. They got tents. They got that's where they live. Now, in Grants Pass, Oregon, they passed a city law that said, hey, if you are camping on public grounds, you're camping in a park, and you've been told you can't do it, it's illegal, they're going to fine you $295 for people that are doing that. Well, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals took that case and found it unconstitutional to punish people for sleeping outside when there's no housing available for them. Now, these are homeless people. Many of them are drug addicts, some mentally ill problems. But Oregon was trying to say, hey, you can't do this. Don't sleep on our sidewalks. Don't sleep in our parks. And we're fining people. Now, advocacy groups like the ACLU stepped in and said, no, we have to defend those people. It's not right. It's cruel and unusual punishment having to do with the Eighth Amendment. And that's what they're basing this on. Says the Eighth Amendment does not allow cruel and unusual punishment. And to people that don't have a home and have to live in the street, $295 is cruel and unusual punishment. That's a case now being heard officially in the U.S. Supreme Court. Probably haven't heard about it. Nobody's probably saying anything or worrying about it because it doesn't fit some people's narratives. But I'm telling you right now, today it was heard in the U.S. Supreme Court. How this is going to be adjudicated and taken care of, I don't know. But whatever the Supreme Court decides to do will determine whether somebody homeless can live on your sidewalk, in your park, in your city, and you can't do a damn thing about it. That's what's being argued in the U.S. Supreme Court. Just want to bring that up to you because nobody in the news seems to want to talk about it. Something you need to know about because it, folks, could happen to you. Just understand that. All right, that's what I know. Keep an eye on the courts. Who knows how this one's going to turn out. See ya.
Coming up next.
I don't know if you know his name or not, but it's Paul Krugman. Now, maybe you've heard the name, or maybe you say, I think that name's familiar. Paul Krugman is an economist, and he also happens to write for the New York Times. Now, if you know anything about newspapers, the New York Times is about as far left as you get. And he wrote a column that said, grocery prices in the last couple of years have gone up over 20%. But hey, it's leveled out. It's only 1, 2, it's nothing nowadays. It's not a big deal. Why are people complaining? Well, Mr. Krugman, you have to understand, lives in a different world than the average middle-class person because he's not middle class. Paul Krugman is an extremely well-paid economist who you and I see on TV all the time. But he's saying, people should not trust their feelings. They shouldn't believe what they're seeing. Things aren't that bad. They're actually doing pretty well under Biden economics. Problem is, he ain't middle class and he doesn't understand what's going on. The prices of in your grocery store have definitely gone up, and they continue to go up. I know because when I shop, I see it. My wife knows when she shops, she definitely sees it. And I'm sure when you go to a grocery store, you pretty much see it yourself. You know what's going on. He's saying, well, it only went up 20%. Some cases even more than that. He said, that's not a big deal. His assumption is that what you're paid by your employer also went up 20%. That's his assumption. That's what he thinks. Hey, everybody got raises. Everybody's getting more money. And besides the elite, they don't shop. They have their servants do that for them. They have their maids, their butlers, their assistants. You and I, we don't have that. And I'll tell you right now, Paul Krugman is trying to make things sound like, oh, everything is rosy, nice and dandy. You and I both know it ain't. There's a problem. We're all suffering, one way, shape, or form. And I told you earlier, come November, there are 4 things that are going to determine how people vote in November of this year. It's going to be food, fuel, healthcare, and housing. Those 4 things. Food is going to be a big one because we all eat. We all go to the store. Fuel, well, if you drive a car, you pretty well know what's happening with the gas prices. Jump up one day, 30 cents more the next day. That's what we're dealing with, folks. And so the New York Times is trying to soften it so you don't believe what you're seeing. Paul Krugman, economist, writer for the New York Times. And now you understand why the New York Times is considered about as left as it gets. Just thought I would pass this along to you in a column where he said, it's not that bad. Everything is hunky-dory. It only went up 20%. No, it didn't. Everything went up, except what you and I are getting paid. Just something for you to think about. Those are my thoughts. Understand them, live with them, or don't. It's your call. See ya.
Coming up next.
You know, normally when I come to you, I talk about things going out in the news, big things going out in the news. It could be political. It could be, well, all sorts of different things, state, local, national. This one is a little bit different because it kind of works in an area that I'm from. Now, you guys know that, or maybe you don't know, that I served the United States Air Force and flew with the military for almost over 20 years. Retired from that, love flying airplanes. I'm a command pilot, which is fine because you live long enough, you fly long enough, you become a command pilot. But I always follow the aircraft industry because things are interesting. And I remember back in the old days of flying, one of the planes I flew was the T-38 Talon. And that you pull G's. Now, here on Earth, we have 1 G on us. So if you go on to say a merry-go-round, and you're on the outside of the merry-go-round, and if it spins faster, you feel pressure on you. If you're going along in a car and you hit a big turn, you feel pressure on you like you're going around the corner. That's G-forces. And what we have to deal with is G-forces. Now, you talk to the NASCAR guys, they go into these turns at 200 miles an hour. They're facing like a 3G pull when they go into these corners, especially on these banked tracks. Now, if you were ever a kid, remember on the playground they had that spinning merry-go-round thing you hung on to, and the faster they spun it around, you had to hold on to dear life because it was pushing you off. People go flying off the merry-go-round thing. Okay? That was G-forces. G-forces exist because of gravity. That's why it's called a G-force. Well, believe it or not, in the world of fighting airplanes and fighters, one of the biggest things that controls fighters and the maximum things you could do is G-force. Now, when I was flying, we would do a loop, a 5G loop. You got going 500 miles an hour, and you pull the stick back to you, shows 5 G's in the G meter, and you do a perfect loop, 5G loop, not a big deal. You make a turn out of pattern, 3G pull, not a big deal. You get used to it. Now, we wore G suits for higher G stuff, but you ever watch the Thunderbirds, the Blue Angels? They do all these maneuvers and things, massive G's, but their bodies are trained for it, especially in the neck. What happens with G's is the blood kind of runs down from your head into your body, and you got no blood in your brain, you're going to black out. So there's training for that, and especially neck training to tighten up all the muscles. And there's maneuvers you could use to keep your muscles tight in your neck so the blood doesn't run out. But anyway, in the fighting game, the most difficult thing for planes to do fighting in air-to-air combat is G-forces. Now, in the F-16, pilots train up for it to be able to withstand 9 Gs. That's 9 times your weight pushing against you. So if you imagine you weigh, say, 200 pounds, 9 times your weight's 1,800 pounds. 1,800 pounds pushing against your body. That's the limitations in fighting fighter aircraft. Well, guess what we have tested? This is the cool part. We have tested a airplane that flies by artificial intelligence. Yes, we actually had a demonstration. 2 fighter aircraft went up and did a dogfight. One was flying with artificial intelligence. The other was flying with a regular pilot. The limitations in flying fighter aircraft is the G-forces, what your body can stand and what the plane can withstand, frankly. So now the weakest link in flying, ladies and gentlemen, in a fighter aircraft is the guy flying it, or the girl. Because ladies fly too. So if you take out that limiting force, the G-forces of the human being flying, artificial AI doesn't care about G's. Doesn't matter to them. But now they've tested it, and they found out it worked. These 2 planes were flying with 1,200 miles an hour, 2,000 feet with each other, and the AI could fly. And AI learns as it flies what they've got to do to avoid the other aircraft. It's just been tested. I know it sounds strange, and I know you're going, well, is that a deal? Yes, it is, because eventually you won't find pilots flying airplanes. You'll find robots flying them, because G-forces on Earth do not affect robots. That ain't good for necessarily pilots, but I'm telling you, that's the way humanity is going, and that's the way the world is going. Robots flying fighters. Ain't it amazing? That's all I got. See ya.
Coming up next. All right, now I realize that some people like cars and some people don't, but in this case, here's another car that only a certain number of people are going to be able to get their hands on because this is really a limited edition. It's the 2024 Shelby. And that's right, you heard me say it right, Shelby Super Snake. And you can have it in 830 horsepower. That's what I'm telling you. Take a look at this. 2024 Shelby Snake. Shelby people get a hold of this. They modified this big time. Now, this is based on the S650 Mustang, and they're going to produce 250 of these cars. That's all they're going to be, 250. Now, normally comes with a 5-liter V8, which is a pretty good size engine, and it'll develop 480 horsepower. But if you want to go with the Supreme version, you can get the V8 with the 3.0 Whipple supercharger. That's what I'm saying. You see the supercharger they put on these cars, you can hear those things coming down the street. They are really something special. But it cranks the horsepower up to 830 horsepower. Now, like I said, it's going to be a really cool vehicle. Only 250 are available. Redesigned suspension, unique wheels, a Borla exhaust, strong brakes, and frankly, better cooling because you need better cooling when you're running that many ponies. So it's a vehicle that's going to be available, but only 250 nationwide. You get in, you get lucky, you may get one. And it ain't going to be cheap, folks. Just telling you right now. Anything from Shelby, it's going to have a pretty penny to it. But it will be available. So if you're in the muscle cars, how about a brand new Shelby, 830 horsepower, and be one of only 250 in America to own one. You can do it. Check with your Ford dealer. They might have one available just for you. See ya.
Coming up next. You know, I believe one of the best and greatest things that happened here in Fort Wayne is honor flights. That's right, honor flights where veterans are flown to Washington, D.C. for the entire day to see monuments, to see Washington, D.C., and to see things most of them have never seen. And they are greeted when they come back by hundreds, maybe thousands of people. It's been going on for years, honor flights have. And now the first honor flight for 2024 is going to be occurring later this month. Honor Flight of Northeast Indiana has announced that they'll be hosting the first flight of the year on April 24th. And they're taking 85 veterans from the Fort Wayne area. And there's ones from the Korean War, Cold War veterans, Vietnam veterans, one from Lebanon, Grenada veteran. And they're taking all these people, flying all these people to Washington, D.C., and they're going to experience things they've never seen in their lives. Most of them have never seen any of this stuff. The Vietnam Wall, which to me is probably one of the most powerful things I've ever personally seen. But that's what's going on. And that's what's going to be happening. Honor Flight started with a guy by the name of Bobby Meyer. Bob Meyer was formerly a colonel in the Air National Guard, and I had the honor and the pleasure of being around Bob for a long time. And Bob was my co-pilot for a number of flights that I flew on. Had him as my co-pilot. And Bobby started these things up, and he has passed the torch on to other people, but it has become a major league event. Starts early in the morning at Bear Field, when they set up breakfast and take care of everybody. And all the various organizations come out, standing there at attention, flags blowing in the breeze. And no matter what they are, they load these individuals onto the airplane. They got special cars, special stairways, special everything. And they fly them to Washington, D.C., spend the entire day going around. They see things, changing of the guard. They see everything. And they fly in that night, usually around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And in the airport, people are waiting for them. They're there applauding. But one of the cool things is veterans get letters and things like that when they're on the plane coming back. Get letters from family and friends and what have you. The veterans flights are all supported by people like you and me. Sponsors spend the money to let these people see something they should have seen, and now they get to see it. Now, I've been told, well, gee, hey, Pat, you can go. You're a veteran. No, I've been to Washington, D.C. plenty of times in my life, plenty of times. I'd rather somebody go who's never seen it, who deserves it. I had to go there because my job took me there for a lot of things. But the honor flights are something special. And the next honor flight is coming up. We have already flown 3,394 veterans to Washington, D.C. to experience the memorials built in their honor. And then when they arrive back in there, at the airport, people greet them. I'm telling you this only because I think it's something special. And I think if you know a veteran, hey, get them on a flight. Get them sponsored. Get them there. It's important. Honor Flights of Northeastern Indiana. I want to thank my friend Bob Meyer for starting this entire adventure. He deserves all the credit in the world. He's a good man. And I'm proud to say I served with him. That's all I got. See ya. Coming up next. All right, I want to talk to you baby boomers out there, those of you that came in after the end of World War II. And in your life, my guess is you put a lot of work in, more than 40 hours a week on any given time when you were growing up. Put a lot of hours of work in just so that you could provide for your family, for yourself, and frankly, you were thinking about how easy life could be when you were out working. Well, apparently those in Generation Z seem to think a little bit differently than those from the baby boomers. Here's a young woman, it says, according to the article. The young woman complains she can't enjoy life working 40 hours a week. and her video is going mega viral. I'm telling you what, she's saying, hey, I can't do it. 40 hours a week is just too much. And she went under the supposedly asylum moniker. I don't know what that is, but complaining about having to work 40 hours a week. She said, hey, I get just enough money. I get $2,000 a month. I got a 2-bedroom apartment, which gets me to saying, hey, excuse me, sweetie, you're single, you got a 2-bedroom apartment, you don't need 2 bedrooms. If I'm going to have 2 bedrooms, I'm going to have a roommate, somebody sharing the freight. That's the way I did it. That's the way most people did it. But she wants that. She said, oh, and I barely have enough money over to cover I don't have enough money to cover all the other bills I have. It's not fair. I'm having to work too much. I'm not allowed to enjoy my life. I'm not kidding you, folks. I want you to listen to what this young woman has to say, because she is upset that she can't enjoy her young life the way she thinks she should. Take a listen.
That I have to work 40 hours a week just so I can have a place to live. 40 hours a week makes me $2,000 a month, and my rent is $1,660. So I work 40 hours a week so I can have a 2-bedroom apartment and an extra $300 a month. Like, it doesn't cover my phone, internet, food, you know? So not only do I not have any extra money, but just working makes me so exhausted.
Hey, sweetie, get over it. That's what we did when we were your age. We worked more than 40 hours a week. You may have worked 10 hours a day, 50 hours, 60 hours a week. And, sweetie, we didn't live in a 2-bedroom apartment when you're single. You had a roommate. You cut the cost. That's the way you survived. And $2,000 a month, and you got an apartment that's $1,660? Hey, I don't know where you're living, but it's pretty high on the hog as far as I'm concerned. But I digress. Let's hear more of what she has to say.
But I don't have time either. Like, I get off work at 5:30, come home, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired that, like, anything that I need to do outside of work, I then just push off to, like, the weekend. And I'm like, I'm just too tired to do this after work. I'll wait until Saturday. So then I end up with so much to do on the weekend that ends up having to be split into 2 days. So I have to do stuff on both Saturday and Sunday. So then I don't get a day off. I don't get a day to relax. I don't get to decompress. So it is really like working 7 days a week, constantly. And I don't want to do that anymore, right? Like, I don't care how poor and miserable I would have to be, but I literally can't have a place to live without this, you know? Like, I don't know what to do. I'm not made for this.
Really? Not made for this. Oh, I'm so tired. I get home at 5:30. Hey, sweetie, there's some of us that didn't get home till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night working. And yes, we still did things. We still lived. We still survived. Generation Z are a bunch of wimp pansies.
Don't have the money, time, or energy to enjoy my life outside of work, and I don't know what to do about it anymore, you know? I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. I'm so tired, she says. I can't enjoy my life. We did. It's called setting your time up, setting your schedule up, what you got to do and how you're going to do it. The fact you're saying, I'm so tired when I get home from work. What are you doing? Toting bags of cement? You don't look like you're toting bags of cement. Don't look like you're chopping wood. Looks like you're working in an office taking some calls. Now, I don't mean to sound harsh here, but our generation, my generation, didn't do this. Generation after us, baby boomers after us, they worked. My kids work. And she's complaining I just don't have time to enjoy myself. Sweetie, get over it. Work, get a roommate, reduce your cost, and you'll survive. Because everybody else before you did. And you better learn how to do it too. Or else you are long gone and you will not be recalled. Just say it. See ya. Coming up next.
If you happen to be a fan of the NCAA, or maybe you've got a kid going into college, this might concern you because right now the NCAA has got themselves a big problem on their hands, which could cost them about $3 billion. That's right, $3 billion. Because a swimmer at Arizona State University, whose last name is House, filed a lawsuit against the NCAA saying, hey, I'm a swimmer and you're making money off of me. Now, there's a thing called NIL, name, image, and likeness, that the universities are currently working with right now. But this lawsuit is in court. And right now, the judge is saying, boys, y'all better figure something out because you ain't going to win this one. And if that happens, the NCAA could be on the hook for roughly $4 billion. They would have to pay the athletes about, I'd say $30 million per year. They'd have to pay, and then another $20 million for the athletes would have to be given out to them over a number of years on this. Now, here's the deal. The situation has gotten down to the point where the major athletic directors of the big conferences, that'd be the Big 12, the Big 10, the Atlantic Coast, and the SEC, are all worried about this potential decision against them. It involves money. The conferences are making boatloads of money. And the students are now saying, we want a cut of that. Not just the name, image, and likeness that they're doing, but the money the universities are making from the broadcast, the television coverage. That's billions of dollars. And the students are saying, hey, if we aren't playing, people ain't watching and the networks ain't paying the money. They want a cut. And it looks like the courts may grant that. So what's the NCAA doing? Well, they want to go to the Congress. And the Congress help them out with this deal. Well, that's antitrust issues going on. And right now, Congress says, nah, we're not getting involved with this. You're on your own for the time being. So what's the NCAA going to do? Nobody knows right now, but they're going to have to figure something out and start paying these athletes. But there's a second lawsuit. Yes, it isn't just one. This is a second lawsuit that has to do with their students joining or being part of a union. This because in Dartmouth University, the students have decided to join a union because they consider themselves to be employees. And that's the big thing the NCAA is worried about. If the courts determine that students are employees of the union of the university, they are entitled to negotiate, just like unions do. Negotiate collective bargaining agreements. They're entitled to all that. But there's a bigger issue going on. Did you know that right now, say a kid wants to transfer from one college to another, and there's an NIL at that new college he or she is going to. Trouble is, under the current situation, the student does not know what the NIL from that school that he or she is looking at, how much it is. They don't know what the NIL contract is going to be till they enroll in a school, and then the school has them. Then they have to live under whatever the school is going to give them because they don't see the NIL contract before they switch universities or, as coming out of high school, go to university. So now lawsuits are being done to say, hey, students have a right to compare all the NIL offers from all of the colleges they're looking at or considering transferring to before they pick a college. What's that saying is students have a right to say, hey, I'm getting a better deal in this university than this university. Therefore, I'm going to go to that university because they would be allowed to know exactly what the NIL deal is. This is where the NCAA is because they are making so much money and I mean a boatload of money, off the television networks. That's what's happening, folks. The students are now saying, we want our cut. And the courts are starting to back the students. That's what's happening, friends. Now you know, especially if you've got a kid going to college, pretty soon they may be able to negotiate some big deal money while they're in college. Now you know. See ya.
Coming up next.
All right, let's talk about shopping with you folks. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you out there shop at a Sam's Club? Show of hands. Well, Sam's Club, if they've got one in your area, chances are they may be using a new AI technology. Maybe your store doesn't have it yet, but Sam's Club, as you all know, is owned by Walmart. Wally World owns that. And the Sam's Club around the United States, apparently they have about 120 of them thus far. They're outfitted with this system. It's a computer system controlled by artificial intelligence. And it was introduced back at the 2024 CES show in Las Vegas. That happens the first of the year. It's a big, giant show, and you see a lot of cool stuff. Well, anyway, here's what it is. It will, when you walk out, you know how when you walk out of Sam's or even Costco for that matter, there's a person standing at the door, and they look over your receipt, and they look at everything in your basket and determine, yeah, okay, you paid for all the stuff in your basket. Truth of the matter is they don't know. They just glance at the receipt, say, okay, you got a receipt here, check it off, fine, leave. They can't check because there's no way to dig down through a shopping cart and all the stuff you have going there to see if you paid for everything there. Let's be honest. It's all show. That's all it is. Now, here's what the new one is. When you walk out, there's going to be kind of like an arch you go through. Sort of like when you go into security situations, you go to a security booth or go through the security gate, TV kind of thing. Go through this arch thing and it beeps and does whatever it does. Well, this one here is going to, when you go through that arch, AI is going to scan to make sure all the stuff in your shopping cart you paid for. Oh, people like me are going to say, wait a minute. How do they know? How do they know that if I'm at Sam's Club and I'm walking out and I got a cart full of stuff, well, I paid for it? Yeah, they can scan all this stuff. They have scan things on it, and the artificial intelligence says I read this code and that code and this code, reads all the codes, but how are they going to know that codes belong to me? Now, I'm only guessing here because I haven't seen this in operation. The receipt they give you apparently has some sort of code on it also. So I believe what you'll have to do is show your receipt to the computer. Here, computer, boop, scan my receipt. Then it scans the stuff in your bag or in your shopping cart and says, okay, the two match up so you're not stealing anything. That's apparently the way it's supposed to work. That's what I'm told. I haven't seen one yet, but we have a Sam's Club here in our community, so maybe they have it, maybe they don't. I don't know. But how they're going to do that? Artificial intelligence, folks. AI is coming, and we're all going to be dealing with it. Just something I thought I would pass along to you. So if you're one to shop at the Sam's Club, get ready for artificial intelligence is coming your way. See ya.
Coming up next. Well, I have some news for those of you who are bug fans. That's right, not Cub fans, bug fans. Because guess what? Cicadas are coming back. Now, I realize we had cicadas a couple of years ago, lasted for about 2 weeks, a lot of noise, and then they were gone. But new cicadas are coming back. Now, here's the deal. The ground temperature has to be 64 degrees or higher before they emerge from the ground. And they've been underground for a long time. Two particular broods. One is called the Northern Illinois brood, which is the brood 13 it's called. Their 17-year cycle. And the second brood is called the Great Southern Brood, which is brood number 19. And they're going to emerge for the first time together. They haven't done this in 221 years. Now, it's going to go from far east is North Carolina, all west to Missouri, far south is Louisiana, and even up north into Wisconsin. Now, Will they hit our area here in the Fort Wayne, Indiana area? Maybe not. And the reason is we had ours a couple of years ago. But people around the United States are going to see these things coming up out of the ground. They're harmless. They don't do anything. They just lay in the ground for years, and they have like a tube in their head that sucks the sap out of plants in the ground. And then they emerge. And they make a very loud sound that it's like a loud buzzing sound. And it's very intense. Now, it's a mating call. Mating calls, that's what these are, male cicadas doing a mating call to females. Unlike humans, the mating call is, hey, how you doing? That's not what cicadas do. They make this buzzing sound. The ladies go over and look for the right buzz, and that's the cicada they hook up with. Now, the only concern you may have is if you've got brand new plants you just put in, baby plants, things like that, female cicadas look for those plants to lay their eggs. And that has the potential, because remember, these eggs are going to be sucking the sap out of things. So if you've got brand new plants, you might want to cover them over with something so the cicadas can't get into them, because that's where they're going to lay their eggs. So, yes, they could be showing up at any time, probably the end of this month and next week or so, or possibly in early May, just depends on the ground temperature. 64 degrees. So cicadas are coming. Are they going to affect us? Probably not, but only time will tell. But everybody else gets to enjoy them. How about them apples? That's all I got for you. See ya. Coming up next. All right, let me ask you a question. How many of you out there have a $2 bill? Now, I know the term is, boy, she's weirder than a $2 bill. That phrase has been used a lot. But actually, $2 bills do, in fact, exist. I know because my wife has a whole slew of them in a box that really has sat there and has never been used for anything. But here, a bank teller is giving advice to people saying 9 reasons why you should never ask for a $2 bill at a bank. And frankly, the reasons sort of make sense when you think about it. And here we go. Reason number 1, they most likely don't have them. Chances are pretty good. Most banks and places, you ask for a $2 bill, they don't have them. They got to go to some special drawer or some special section of the bank to get them because banks don't normally carry them. Item number 2, they don't have room in the drawer. And if anybody who's ever been a checker and you check things out, you got the $1, the $5, the $10, the $20, and maybe a $50 or $100 slot. There is no place for $2 bills because the drawers don't need them and don't want them. So a banker would have to find a different spot to put them, and that makes for a gigantic pain. So don't be asking bankers for them. Next one, they put a wrench in the flow. You ask for a $2 bill, you go to the bank, it's going to back everybody up. They're going to stand behind you and start saying bad things about you to your back because they don't normally carry them. Don't waste the time. And if you're a newbie, a new person, like a young person, you hand a $2 bill to some teenager, they're going to go, what is this, monopoly money, fake money? They don't understand. Don't confuse young people with it because they're idiots. They don't understand regular money or even a $2 bill for crying out loud because they're only used to a credit card, only used to a debit card. To them, money is weird. Now, people think they're fake. This is true. How many times you can see somebody hand them a $2 bill, they go, what, give me a fake bill? Public doesn't want anything to do with them. Most people think they're fakes, and you're going to have trouble with some young cashier looks at it and she doesn't know what the hell to do. That's the problem with the $2 bill. That was also the problem with those Sacagawea coins. Remember those coins they tried to... Yeah. That was about the biggest mistake in the history of modern mankind. But yeah, they did it. Cost the taxpayer a boatload of money for something nobody wanted, nobody used. And finally, if people get $2 bills, the chances are they're going to just put them away in an envelope, in a box, someplace. Like in my house. They are in a little box. A whole bunch of $2 bills. I don't think my kids have ever seen them and probably won't know what to do with them if they do. That's the problem in today's America. We have a bill, a $2 bill. It's legal, it's legit, but nobody knows what the heck to do with it, and banks don't want to mess with it. Just saying, here's the story. If you're into a $2 bill, you might want to get rid of that. Just forget it even exists. Just saying. Now you know. Coming up next. Allow me to ask you a question. How many of you out there have ever played the game Scrabble? Well, guess what? The people who make Scrabble have decided to come up with a woke version. That's right, folks, a woke version. Well, for snowflakes, Gen Z, wussies. Here's the deal. The board has two sides now. New Games board, two sides. One side is the original Scrabble, the way we all knew it and worked with it over the years, from my youth even. The other side is the woke version. That's right, for Gen Z and the snowflakes, they get their own version, makes it really easy, and nobody gets offended. And you can really easily they have prompt cards to tell you what words to make up. I mean, no competition, there's no more scoring. They don't even score in the new woke version. And to me, it's dumbing down people. That's my opinion. And the new version, all you have to do is finish a goal, whatever a goal is, to collect a gold card. And gold cards include challenges like play a horizontal word. Oh, really? Play a horizontal word. Okay. Play a three-letter word. A three-letter word? This is how we're telling the Generation Z to grow up? Not my world, folks. Sorry. And no scoring, no nothing. It's a wussy game. And they say, well, Generation X, they're not competitive like other generations were. They really don't want to go after it. And frankly, it's not fair to them because they don't, well, it hurts their feelings. Give me a break. So the new version of Scrabble, folks, for the Gen Z snowflakes. And a Mattel spokesman says that while this is going to start in Europe, okay, so it's not here in the U.S. yet. It's going to start in Europe, but they haven't got licensing done in the United States to be able to do it. Hasbro apparently sells Scrabble, and they say, well, we can get it in Europe, but maybe not in the United States. Fine by me. You know, America, we need to be tough like we've always been. You start, wussying things down and say, oh, we're going to have no scoring Scrabble? Who's going to win? Nobody, because there is no scoring. Gee, looks like a participation trophy. No, sorry, it don't work. So there you go, folks. A new Scrabble could be coming to a market near you. Two sides, one for real people, and the other side for Generation Z, the woke wussies. Just saying. Now you know. Coming up next.
Way back in the mid-1970s, I started a job in radio in sales. And my sales account list was a phone book. And that phone book had names in it, and I just went down through it and wandered around looking for potential accounts, wandered into a store at Glenbrook Mall. And there was a jeans store there. So I went in, thought, well, here's a possibility, selling jeans. I'm working for WMEE, which dealt with the younger folk. Thought I'd talk to the manager. Turns out the manager ended up being a very, very close friend of mine and has been even until today. And allow me to introduce him, none other than my best friend and has been forever, Dean McNeil. Dean, son, it is a pleasure to see you again.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. And I was thinking about that the other day. I think that was like 1979, somewhere around there.
Well, actually, I think it was 77. And
77? Holy moly.
It was 77 because I was working in sales. I was working for Walt Steffen at MEE. Right. And he gave me my account list, which is the yellow pages. And so I was just going out looking for places, and I went into the store, and you and I never knew each other. We didn't at that point. And whatever it was, I kept going back, and we kept talking to each other. And you indicated to me you were interested in radio stuff. And ultimately, I brought you into the radio station. We went into the recording booth, and we did some recordings. And that's how things got started and lit a fire under you.
Yeah, the deal was that I was originally in radio in like 1971 and 72, got out, and then got into retail. So I knew a little bit about the business, had done many commercials back in the day. And you came into the store, and having spent many years of doing sales myself later on in my career, making cold calls, not one of my favorite things to do.
No, it wasn't. But it turns out there was something that worked between us, and I don't know what it was. Ultimately, we became friends. And then you still had the radio bug going on, but being friends, like a lot of folks don't realize, you're a graduate of New Haven High School, correct?
Right, 1971, yep.
1971, so you graduated from New Haven High School. We are both athletes, whether we like to admit it or not. We were both athletes. And the one thing we loved doing back in those days, we played racquetball. Now, that was racquetball back then was, well, it was something that we both enjoyed. And it was over at the old Summit City Sports Illustrated Racket Club over there on Trier Road. That's where we played. Had the glass walls and stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
It was either you or I or the threesome. There's a gentleman by the name of Jerry Furman. He also went to New Haven. Didn't Jerry go to New Haven with you?
Yeah, Jerry graduated same year I did.
All right, Jerry Furman, who's a now big-time accountant, and he's a board of directors or something. Jerry's doing extremely well. So we would play racquetball, and best of friends off the court. We got on the court, we would kill each other.
Yeah, it was brutal. I can't tell. Well, I shouldn't say this, but I think I destroyed 2 or 3 rackets playing you guys because I got so frustrated.
Yeah, we were both so intense at doing this. So not only did we play racquetball together, we played softball together. And we played that. Matter of fact, I broke one of my fingers one time sliding into third base back in those days. And let's see, we played softball, and we've also played basketball because WME had the basketballer team. So we played on that. And the one time we played at your old high school, you were on vacation at that time.
Yeah, I remember. And you had probably your best game ever, didn't you?
I had my best game ever. They'd have the 3-point line. God knows what I would have done.
You'd have been Caitlin Clark of your day.
Yeah, I know. But the whole thing is, Deanie, he got himself into radio. And I want people to understand, you liked it in the beginning, but this gave you a different insight, and you decided to push ahead and go back into radio. So how did you get back into it ultimately after start dealing with me?
Well, one of the deals was back then you had to have a first class or a third class license. You remember I had to take the test. Yeah. Well, I got through, there's supposed to be 3 elements. I got through 2 of them, couldn't pass that engineering one. So had to get out of radio. And then I think the FCC decided that we don't need to have that third class license anymore.
That's correct.
Radio.
And so I had a first class, and they didn't need that either eventually.
Yeah, and those were very impressive. If you had a first class license, that was very impressive back in the day. And to answer your question, I was playing softball for WMAE and WQHK at the time. And the program director at the time was Tony Richards, who's those 2 guys, Tony and Charlie.
And Tony.
And I had mentioned that I had been in radio. Tony and I became very good friends, and they were looking for an opening. They had an opening on a Sunday morning to run Casey Kasem's Top 40.
Oh, yeah.
So I went in the studio with Tony, and we did a little air check. I think the first song I played was America, song by America.
Oh,
and then one thing led to another, and the late Bob Elliott, along with John Curry and names from the past, Tony Richards hired me for Sunday mornings, and then I was on my way, and that was like 1982, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Well, so then eventually being an on-air announcer is one thing, but then you got the bug about being into, for lack of a better term, management. And back in the old days, folks, they called them program directors. Now we call them operations managers or something to that effect. So what led you into that?
Well, the deal is, I guess being a Capricorn, I always like to be in control. So
yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one.
That kind of led to being a program director, and I always felt that I had a pretty good sense for being a PD. And I ended up going to Lafayette, Indiana, and working for a great guy by the name of Don Riley, who, if you have folks in Indianapolis, Don was a big star down there, just retired a couple years ago. He hired me to do middays, and from middays, I got my first PD gig in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I mean, what a great place to get a program director's job, living on the beach. It was nice.
There was another gentleman in your life, and we both knew him, John David Spangler.
John David Spangler, exactly.
And you have some connections with him because he was sort of an icon to a lot of us. He knew a lot of folks, so he was sort of one of your mentors taking you along too, correct?
Yeah, JD kind of, when I first got married in 1985 to my current wife, who is, we're going on, this will be our 40th year come next March. We just celebrated 39
God bless her
years.
for putting up with you, for crying out loud.
Exactly. But the funny thing was, JD, during that time that we had just gotten married, he was working as the program director in Des Moines, Iowa. And he offered me a job in Des Moines. He offered me a job in somewhere else. And I just didn't want to leave the Midwest. We had 4 kids in the household, plus one of my own. So we were kind of busy trying to raise kids, didn't want to move a bunch of people around. But yeah, JD was very instrumental. He took care of me when I did overnights at QHK in Fort Wayne, because I went from doing part-time at MEE to heading to Bryan, Ohio, which is a station in Bryan, Ohio. I can't remember the call letters, but it was run by solar power completely.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, very cool. And because people used to ask me, well, what do you do when the sun's not shining? And of course, you just laugh about that because you know the deal behind that. The sun charges the batteries stay.
Of course.
You do your deal. So anyway, I went from, the Bryan, Ohio station, and also started doing overnights at QHK. And the funny thing was, I think I was on the radio. I love radio so much that I was on the air for about 90 straight days at one time, because I was doing afternoon drive, if you can consider that in a small town of Bryan, Ohio. I was doing that Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, I was doing part-time shifts on WMEE. So I was on the radio all the time. I mean, I loved the business, just a lot of fun. And of course, one thing led to another, went to Lafayette, from Lafayette to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, my first PD gig in South Carolina.
And eventually one of the other places you went to, because your career was long and storied, you ended up at another place, was in Savannah, Georgia, because when I was flying down there for the Air Guard, I remember I called you and stopped in to see you at the station, and there you were in Savannah. So, I mean, you have moved around some pretty interesting gigs in some pretty interesting areas.
Well, the cool thing was I actually was in Myrtle Beach at the time and ran into a guy by the name of Bob Birch, who was starting an FM country station in Peoria, Illinois. And I had always wanted to be the guy that started the station. So we packed up the troops, moved to Peoria. We spent only about 6 months there because management was pretty bad at the time. So I ended up running into a guy by the name of Phil Hunt, who is a big-time consultant with Rusty Walker, probably 2 of the biggest country consultants in America. I called Phil Hunt like out of the blue and said, here's my story. I want to get the heck out of Peoria. Can you get me a gig somewhere? A little time went by, and Phil got me a great job in Savannah, Georgia. And what a great city. We loved Savannah, Georgia. Just beautiful down there.
Oh, yeah, nice place. And plus going downtown eating the oysters. That was always my idea of fun when I was down there.
Yeah, the big thing was on Bay Street. If you ever get a chance, if folks get a chance, go to Savannah and eat like shrimp. I think it's fried shrimp, or they're called something. But if you go on Bay Street, the Savannah River is right there. Which, of course, every St. Patrick's Day they dye green, which is crazy. And the funny thing is, Savannah is still, as far as St. Patrick's Day is concerned, it's still one of the biggest celebrations in the world for St. Patrick's Day.
Well, a lot of folks don't know, folks. Deanie's been married to Ruthie for about 40 years now.
Well, we just celebrated 39 years this past month.
39 years. He's got kids. He's got grandkids. He's got what? Great grandkids?
We have 1 great grandchild and we have 10 grandchildren.
In 1980, I got married, and the guy who was my best man, him to be my best man. How the hell you ever put up with me getting through that mess was just beyond me. But a lot of people don't realize the wedding. Do you remember our wedding reception and where it was held?
Oh, yeah, at the Embassy Theater. How cool is that? Had Pat and Linda up on the big marquee on the street. It was super.
I don't think anybody's ever done that previously, because I think we were just it was a Luke. I mean, it was just I took a shot at it and they let me do it. But so I got married in '80, and the truth is, you kept moving up and moving up, and eventually, this went along. You kept being an operations manager at various places. The coolest one to me was when we were up in Chicago, and you were in one of the biggest buildings in America, right there on the lake shore, and you were the operations manager of probably the #1 country station, probably in America.
Yeah, at the time I went there in 1993, spent 93 to 97 there. We were at US 99 in Chicago. We were on the 13th floor, which is kind of funny, in the Hancock building on Michigan Avenue on the Magnificent Mile. And at the time while I was there, JD Spangler, who I had, met many years ago and had kept in touch with, JD got me the job in Chicago. And then he was the general program manager and I was the program director. JD was doing mornings there. And he would leave every day at 10 o'clock, and then I would handle programming responsibilities the rest of the day. And really pretty cool, Pat. I tell you, a lot of people don't believe this, but at the time, country music was really starting to hit in '89 and 1990. Garth Brooks, George Strait, Clint Black, Alan Jackson, just some of the biggest names. But at the time, we were the #1 country station in America. We had over 1 million listeners a week. Really impressive.
Well, because of that, you actually got to go to a lot of events and see and be part of events that those people were in, including visiting their homes, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to, and we have talked about this in the past, and I've talked to country music people who go, "You're kidding, you got to do that." The CMA is a gigantic award show that the country music industry has every year, and they always have a big party the day before the CMA Awards. And I was telling this story to Pat not long ago. I think the listeners will love this. If you're a Reba McEntire fan, of course, Reba's on The Voice now, and she's a lot of fun on there. But we were actually at a party at her house. JD and I and our music director at the time, Trish Biondo, were at Reba's house. And what she had done is she had taken her tennis court in Nashville and put a gigantic tent over the top of the tennis court. And I swear to God, it's just unbelievable. We're standing there with our drinks in hand, and a lady walks up to us with a tray with drinks on it and says, "Can I refresh your drinks, any guys?" And it was Reba McEntire.
Oh, you're kidding. She was
around refreshing people's drinks. I mean, how down to earth is that, and how cool is that?
She was your waitress. And a lot of folks don't understand. Most of the people in country are down-home folks pretty much like you and I.
Yeah, they are all like that. I mean, I've met Ruthie and I, between the two of us, working in the biggest market in the country and, having 1 million listeners a week. A lot of folks loved us. They wanted us to play their music. But I've been fortunate enough to been to Brooks and Dunn's house. I've been to Reba's house, been to Marty Stewart's house, Billy Ray Cyrus. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, those were like fond days that were just crazy because it was so cool.
Well, eventually you ended up working yourself back to Fort Wayne, and you became the operations manager for MEE, QHK. MEE is the rock and roll. QHK was the country station. You were running the rodeo, and we would see each other. A lot of people didn't know the friendship that you and I had, the relationship. We didn't make a big thing about it because we didn't feel it was necessary, but you were right down the hallway. And when we had sports talk that would come on, when Art couldn't be there, Art Salzberg, who I'm talking about, Art and Dean, you would fill in for Art on sports talk. Because I remember when my shift was over, you'd be out in the hallway walking in, dragging your stuff into the studio right where I was sitting.
Yeah, it was a funny thing because I went from Chicago to Fort Wayne. They had an opening in Fort Wayne, and we kind of wanted to get back to the little smaller town and a bunch of people we knew. So I took the job in Fort Wayne. Tony Richards hired me and brought me back to Fort Wayne, and I was the OM for both MEE and K105. And K105, which is just a dominant country station here in Fort Wayne and still is. Yep. I was fortunate enough to bring Dan Austin, who was doing overnights for me at US 99 in Chicago. I brought him and his wife, Lynn, to Fort Wayne, and Dan is still doing afternoons on K105. In fact, right now at this moment, if you're listening to the show in the afternoon. But yeah, we had a great time. And then Tommy Allen was the program director of WOWO at the time. And Art was thinking about kind of retiring and stuff. He was on there with Dean Pantazzi, and Tommy's office was right next to mine. And he kind of knew my love of sports. So he said, "Well, why don't you fill in sometime and see how it goes?" And I tell you how I got the job. You will love how they hired me. The day that Bobby Knight got fired was a Sunday.
Yeah.
Sitting at home, I heard it come down. I told Ruthie, I said, we should be on the radio taking people's comments. We need to talk about this. I called Tommy Allen. He said, yeah, go ahead and go on the air at the top of the hour. Whenever you can get there, I'll get a hold of Pantazzi. We'll get together. And then the rest is history. I got to do, sports talk. I actually filled in and took Art Salzberg's place. A lot of people don't know that. But, I got to take Art's place, and I loved every minute. And the cool thing was I was on right after you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's cool being after me. But I will tell you, a lot of folks don't know. As a sports fan, you are a diehard Boston Red Sox fan. And the other thing and which was fine with me because I was a Cubs fan. But the other thing is, it caught both of us. You were a Packers fan, and I was a Cowboys fan. that was one of those things we had to do. One of the things that people have forgotten back in the old days, you and I both worked for the Vincent brothers.
Yeah,
We want to talk about that, but we did.
Yep.
And we worked at their facility. And I remember in the spring they wanted to have their football game. We went over to the YWCA. I had on these big, tall, dumbass shoes I was wearing, and we were playing football out there in the mud. And I remember us doing that. That was some of the things that we got to do that most people would go, you guys did what?
Well, the funny thing was Mark and Eric Vincent owned Warehouse Liquors. A lot of some of your older folks remember Warehouse Liquors on Coliseum Boulevard, like an 8,000 square foot liquor store.
Yeah.
And Eric and Mark, along with Skip Sandals, who still cuts hair in Fort Wayne, they were big Cleveland Brown fans. You remember this? This will bring back some.
Boy, do I remember this one.
The funny thing is, I don't know if anybody ever does this anymore, and I'm not even sure if it's safe to do it or not. But we ended up, or legal. So they ended up chartering a big bus, and we took a bus load of guys up to Cleveland for the Bengals and the Browns game. And as I've reminded Pat on numerous occasions, I'm smoking a cigar at 7:00 in the morning, and I don't smoke.
Yeah, neither of us did. But it's crazy. We had the game, and the trip coming back was the most eventful one because whenever the bus would move forward or a wave of liquid, and I have no idea what the heck it was on the floor, would slosh from the front of the bus to the back of the bus. And we were sitting there. We had to lift our feet off the floor to let the tidal wave go through. And the worst thing, and this is probably illegal, but they can't get us now. The statute of limitations run out. The restroom on the bus. They had a restroom on the bus, and with 40 guys on there and beer, you don't buy beer, you rent it.
That's right, exactly.
And we rented a great deal of it. And the restroom, the holding tank full.
Yeah.
The bus driver pulled off the road. I don't remember where we were, somewhere on the road coming back to Cleveland. And he emptied the tank on the side of the road.
Yeah, that's probably as illegal as heck, but yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah, it was up now. Statute of limitations run out. You can't do anything to us.
Yeah.
And it was so bad. We were going through, I'm going to say, I think it was Garrett. Okay, coming into Garrett. And it was hot. We had the windows down the side of the bus. And it was right around the time church in the evening was getting out. Boy, if I remember this one. I remember some of the guys, whose names we won't mention, were pounding on the side of the bus out in the windows at the women going by the church that was getting out. That's what we endured. That was a bus. I swear, I don't know if Skip Sandals even wants to talk about that with anybody because I don't know if he's still cutting hair, if he's cutting yours.
Yeah, he still cuts my hair.
And but these are some of the people that we've been around in the years. People got to understand, we made a point of living life,
Yeah.
And now, one of the things that, and a lot of folks don't know this, back in 2019, unfortunately, Dean had a meeting with the medical system and ended up having to have heart surgery. And for a lot of us, that's a scary thing. But man, you pull through like a champion.
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time. It was hereditary. I had an aortic aneurysm and went into a doctor. It's kind of weird, Pat. You kind of wonder why you move to certain areas. It's all kind of a part of life. It's really weird. But I went to the doctor in Melbourne, Florida, where my mom was, and met a physician down there. And he was poking around on my back with a stethoscope and heard some things he didn't like to hear. And I ended up finding out I had an aortic aneurysm, and it was kind of small at the time. So we watched it until about 2019, kept getting bigger and bigger. And then I ended up having 8 hours of open heart surgery, had a brand new aortic valve, a brand new mitral valve. And, but I was in pretty good physical shape at the time. I got through it, no problem. And, knock on wood, been good since 19. But yeah, 8 hours of open heart surgery, crazy.
And I remember Ruthie sending pictures of stuff to you and everything, so we knew what was going on because she knew that you and I are as close as we were. And it's just been, and I want folks to understand, Dean started in this, and suddenly the fire hit, it lit him up, and he became a whole lot bigger than big because he had a dream, and he wanted to get somewhere, and he wanted to be somebody, but he wasn't afraid of hard work, putting in the hours, putting in the time, and not worrying about anything else. But you got a dream, you go for it, and you don't let anything stand in your way. And I think that pretty much describes you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was kind of knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And, we talked about JD Spangler. Well, JD came later in my career. I ended up moving from Fort Wayne, got blown out in Fort Wayne by a general manager we won't mention, but got blown out by him. And then I ended up moving to Marshall, Illinois, which is just outside of Terre Haute, Indiana. Of course, we all know Terre Haute in the news right now with Indiana State playing for the championship at the NIT, which is pretty cool.
That, by the way, is tonight.
Tonight, exactly. This is Thursday night. Yeah, be tonight. Good Sycamores. But JD hired me there. I ended up doing mornings for 12 years there. 12 solid years, got up every day at 4:45, drove to the radio station on the air from 5:30 to 9 every day. And then, of course, I did sales from 9 o'clock until about 2 in the afternoon and did those cold calls like how we met. And, thankful to JD for giving me a gig, but really loved the small market, kind of became I guess you could say a big fish in a small pond because, I used to have to give myself extra time when I went to Walmart and restaurants because everybody knew who I was. And it was pretty cool. It was very, very flattering for me.
Well, eventually you guys retired down in Florida, down in the Melbourne area. You were down there and I was down there because, I retired down there.
Exactly.
We would talk to each other and see about getting together and we were going over to Jacksonville. I think we were talking about going to. Never did that. But ultimately, I got pulled back to Fort Wayne because Linda wanted to come back. My wife wanted to come back and be a nana to our granddaughters. And you eventually returned home too. So it turns out you came home and I came home and we still are friends.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been like we've talked about, we have been friends I probably have maybe a handful of people, as you probably do too, who you have been friends with for 50 years. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Well, there was another individual who wanted to be best man, and who the guy was working for.
I do.
Yeah, he was not happy that I chose you, but there was a reason for it because you and I were so close at so many things we did because we were highly competitive, but we played together on sports teams. We just found it was just you and I who just became friends because of a chance meeting. A sales meeting, a cold call for me, and you running a jeans store.
Yeah, and we should also let the folks know that you were the best man at my wedding also.
Well, yes, that's true, and that's because that was an honor for me. But me getting married in the first place, that's how that's been in my life. But I've gone 44 years. I guess I'm doing okay. And Ruthie, you folks don't know, Ruthie is about the sweetest lady. And why she took somebody as tall as you, because she ain't tall, let's be honest. But man, she's a powerhouse.
Yeah, and she's about 5 foot tall and weighs maybe 95, 6 pounds.
And he sent me pictures of both of them. I'm going, he's playing basketball, and she said, I'm not sure what she's playing, but it was just great people. But now Deanie is back in Fort Wayne. You're part of the city like we both are. And the one thing I surprised me the last time I saw him when I went to lunch, Deanie was driving a Corvette.
And I actually sold my Corvette, Pat.
You did? No
I
kidding.
I sold it. I sold it about 3 weeks ago.
Oh my God. I was very surprised you drive an Event, but you looked good. I'll give you that. You look very good.
Nice. And here's the reason I sold it real quick. I love the car. Great car. If I would have stayed in Florida, I would have kept it. But you know what? Living in Indiana and having a Corvette, it was in the garage more than it was out. So I said, you know what? It's going to kill me to sell this thing. But I did.
Well, but did you find something to replace it that was comparable?
I actually bought a Lexus.
You didn't go bad. I can give you that. It didn't go bad. Well, all I can tell you, folks, this gentleman has been part of my life in a lot of ways, through the goods, the bads, but he has been there. But he's also been a radio star, on air, behind the scenes, management. And I can tell you, here's somebody that I can tell you flat out that started at the bottom and worked his way up. And frankly, he was proud of what he did. And if he'd had the chance to do it again, my guess is he'd probably do it all over again. When you love the business we're in, you will do what you got to do.
Yeah, radio is business. I love the showbiz aspect of it, you know, giving away tickets, doing backstage passes, doing bar promotions, getting out and talking to listeners, you know. Yeah, you just cannot beat any of that. Very, very cool business.
But at least we can say that looking at our lives, we've both done some things, but we brought ourselves back to the place called home. And for us, he and I, our home is Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we're both proud of being here.
Yeah, I love Fort Wayne, but I don't like the weather.
He likes Florida. He was fine with that because he likes to wear shorts and flip-flops. You know, that's pretty much it. Well, Deanie, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with me. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt getting this thing set up.
That was cool.
But at least folks are going to know that I'm not the only one who's in this business. There's other people, and they did a lot better than I did. But by golly, it's good to know them and good to be part of their lives as well.
Well, one of the things I want to tell you, Pat, and I'm not stroking you because I've known you forever, but I listen to your podcast when I'm pumping a little iron in the morning, and I learn more. I learn a ton of things about politics. I learn a lot of things about Fort Wayne, and I learn some stuff that I don't really care if I know or not, but that's all part of your deal. But congrats on getting back on these podcasts because you did a great job on WOWO and had great listeners on there, great ratings, and I'm just glad you're back doing something that you like to do. Well, we both understood what it's like to get blown out, though, don't we? We do, by the same guy, which is pretty cool. Funny how that worked itself out. You know what? We're still surviving, and that's what makes us unique. That's right. Deanie, I appreciate it, partner. God bless you, and my best to Ruthie, okay? I will do that, and same to Linda. All right, son, we'll see you then. All right, thanks. Bye now. I see you.
Well, that does it for today's edition of the Pat White Show. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to follow us on social media for the latest Pat White Show for all the news and updates. And stay tuned for brand new episodes of the Pat White Show coming real soon. Like what you're hearing? Make sure you don't miss an episode by following the Pat White Show on Spotify. Just search for the Pat White Show, hit follow, and get ready for insightful conversations delivered straight to your Spotify feed. If you enjoy watching podcasts as much as listening to them, good news! The Pat White Show is also on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel now for visual content, behind-the-scenes footage, and full podcast experience. Find us on YouTube at the Pat White Show channel.